You have done extensive research on the efficacy of like comparing the efficacy of different diets versus the medications like statin drugs to lower the cholesterol. Could you please share your findings with our viewers, and share a few tips to lower cholesterol with food, and maybe even avoid taking cholesterol lowering medications?
Well, thank you. Yes, the story is a very old one. It started with Dennis Burkitt and Hugh Trowell, who were the great fathers, if you like, of the modern era of dietary fiber, when they returned to Britain from Uganda, where they'd been medical people serving the Uganda population at Makerere University. They found that they saw a completely different spectrum of diseases when they got back to Britain from what they'd seen and what they'd been teaching medical students when they were in Uganda. So they were thinking at the time, what is the reason for Western disease as they saw it? And why do people in other countries very often escape these diseases? And one of the things that Dennis Burkitt always used to say to me, one of the things he noticed was so remarkable, was that if he wanted to get a urine specimen, he'd ask people to go behind the screen, they'd give a urine specimen, and we'd do the same thing. We'd ask someone to go into the washroom and produce a urine specimen, and that's fine. But he could also say, well, I want to look at parasites and these sort of things, so I'd like you to give a fecal specimen. And they would go out around the screen and they would do a fecal specimen. We could never ask people in Western countries to give a fecal specimen on the spot. You have to be prepared for it. I mean, so it's a big activity. And he said when he came back to Britain, he found that he used to go to hotels where they invited him to speak, and he stayed in the hotels. And he found that he went into the bathroom, and by the lavatory there was a telephone. And he thought, they actually conduct their business because they're on this pot for so long. So there must be. And so he realized that constipation was a significant problem in Western countries, which it's not, where people eat differently in other cultures. So that was really the beginning of the dietary fiber hypothesis, the realization that it wasn't just what you absorbed, but it's what you didn't absorb, which had an effect on your physiology. And it was interesting, he saw very few, if any, cases of colon cancer. There was no diabetes, and cardiovascular disease was rare. So that was, I think, the major starting point. And it was at that starting point that I was lucky, because I was in that environment. I'd been training in a gastroenterology unit. We were funded by the Medical Research Council to look specifically at dietary fiber. And one of my colleagues looked at the sort of colon side, and I looked at the small intestine side, and looked at what fiber was doing. And we noticed lots of things. But above all, we did notice that if you took certain types of fiber, the more sticky types of fiber that you find in oats and barley and okra and eggplant and these sort of things, those sort of fibers were associated with increased lowering of serum cholesterol, so reduced serum cholesterol. And we were lucky in that unit because there was someone who trained also in Paris, where they'd been looking at different types of fiber. And she was able to show us that it was the stickiest types of fibers, the pectins and these sort of substances that bound bile acids. They trapped bile acids within the bowel and took them out. And bile acids is one of the ways that you lose cholesterol from the body, because the liver produces more bile acids from your blood cholesterol as well as the cholesterol it produces itself. So that was interesting. And so we found that there were things that you could do that were nothing to do with the fat or the protein or the saturated fat or the dietary cholesterol, which also had an effect on serum cholesterol and therefore probably on heart disease. So we started looking at different foods, and we found that the sticky fibers were useful. We found that later on, we found that nuts were particularly useful in terms of lowering serum cholesterol. We found that vegetable proteins, interestingly, not just because they replaced meat, but because of their own properties in protein foods like beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas, these things that people eat around the world in more healthy dietary patterns. And these sort of foods also, in India, for example, lots of dal and these sort of foods, and chickpeas too, and so a lot of use of these foods. These also lower serum cholesterol. So not by a lot, but by about sort of 5%. And we found that the sort of plant sterols, the plant's equivalent of cholesterol that you find in leafy vegetables and oils especially, we found that these things also lowered serum cholesterol. So my wife said to me, look, at no point, you're not going to get a lot of mileage out of this because nobody's interested in a 5% reduction in serum cholesterol. She said, you should put these things together. And so we did. We called it dietary portfolio, after the financial portfolio, where you include a lot of things in your wealth, as it were, your wealth of cholesterol lowering. If you put these things together in the same diet, you can actually get quite significant reductions. And quite early on, we saw that you could get early statin-like reductions if you stacked all these things up in the diet. So we're still researching on that particular line of work because we think it's important if you can lower cholesterol by, as it were, natural means. And it puts it within the realm of everyone. And it's a good supplement too if people are on statins, because if they are, you don't want to go to sort of 40 or 80 milligrams of a standard statin if you can get away with 20 or 10.
Yes.
So, and that dietary approach may allow you to do that. So we thought it was useful. And so